the president of Formula One's governing body, just did something almost unheard of. He publicly admitted his own organization got it wrong. Not a vague, diplomatic non-answer. An actual admission of mistakes, on the record, after months of drivers openly criticizing the very regulations his organization designed. And the driver whose comments seem to have finally forced that admission out into the open is Lewis Hamilton. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what pushed the FIA to this point, and why this moment matters a lot more than a single quote in an interview. Let's set the scene properly, because this didn't come out of nowhere. The 2026 season introduced completely new chassis and power unit regulations, the biggest technical reset the sport has seen in years. And almost immediately, drivers across the grid started raising concerns, not quietly in private debriefs, but publicly, in press conferences, on team radio, in post-race interviews. This wasn't one disgruntled driver complaining about a bad weekend. This was a pattern building across multiple races, multiple teams, and multiple driver personalities who don't normally agree on much. The breaking point came at the Belgian Grand Prix in Spa. That circuit, with its long straights and heavy energy demands, exposed exactly how severe the energy management problems with these new cars actually were. Drivers found themselves managing battery deployment so aggressively that it started affecting actual racing, cars losing power at critical moments, straight line speed becoming unpredictable, overtaking opportunities disappearing because nobody could commit to a move without knowing if their energy reserves would hold up. Carlos Sainz and Lewis Hamilton were both vocal about it that weekend, publicly questioning how regulations with this many issues had ever made it through the approval process in the first place. Think about how significant that question actually is. These aren't casual fans complaining online. These are two of the most experienced drivers on the grid, people who've spent years working directly with engineers, understanding exactly what makes a race car function at the highest level, asking out loud how a rulebook this flawed got signed off by the sport's own governing body. And here's where it gets genuinely interesting. Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the FIA president, didn't dismiss the criticism or brush it aside the way governing bodies often do when facing public pressure. Speaking to Viaplay, he directly acknowledged that mistakes were made with the 2026 regulations. For words that carry an enormous amount of weight coming from the head of Formula One's regulatory authority. This isn't a team principal complaining about a decision that didn't go his team's way. This is the person ultimately responsible for approving these rules, admitting, on the record, that the process broke down somewhere. Why does that admission matter so much beyond just being a headline? Because it validates everything drivers have been saying for months, often at real risk of sounding like they're simply making excuses for underperforming. When Hamilton and Sainz raised concerns at Spa, there was always a chance it could be written off as frustration from drivers not adapting quickly enough to new technology. Ben Sulayem's admission removes that excuse entirely. If the sport's own president is saying mistakes were made, that's confirmation the problems drivers identified were real, structural issues with the regulations themselves, not driver error or lack of adaptation. There's also a bigger conversation happening underneath all of this, one about how much influence drivers actually have over decisions that directly affect their safety and the quality of racing itself. For years, there's been tension between drivers wanting more say in regulatory decisions and governing bodies treating those regulations as settled once approved. This moment, a very public admission of fault following very public driver criticism, suggests that pressure from drivers speaking out together can actually move the needle, even at the highest levels of the sport's bureaucracy. Think about what happens next from here. Does this admission translate into actual mid-season changes to how energy management is regulated, or is it simply an acknowledgement without immediate action? Does it embolden other drivers who've had similar concerns but stayed quieter publicly, worried about how criticism of the FIA might be received? And does this change the tone of the relationship between Hamilton specifically and Ben Sulayem going forward, given Hamilton has been one of the more consistently vocal critics of FIA leadership over recent years, well before this particular controversy?